What's going on, everybody? Brenden Schaeffer, Ryan Fagan here for Card Central 365. Sounds a little different, but it's the same show, same content. Plenty of Cardinals talk coming your way this afternoon from a couple. I said, we're both used to sitting in this chair,
right, yeah.
Ryan. So when I came in, I happened to beat you to the punch. I got here first, and so we're a couple of sidekick baseball writers talking Cardinals today. Card Central 365. Here on STL Sports Central. This is presented by Gray Bar, and all content on STL Sports Central is brought to you by DraftKings. The crown is yours. Ryan, I don't know if we could have had a much more eventful doubleheader yesterday between the Cardinals and Royals, but we'll take a bit of a look back before we look forward to everything going on this weekend with the Dodgers coming to town. Obviously, will be a marquee series. Yeah. But what do you think the biggest thing from yesterday was? Probably the Matthew Liberatore situation that everybody is kind of wondering about right now.
Yeah.
When you saw him taken out of the game in that final at-bat against Michael Garcia, I thought, oh boy, doesn't look good. But then the Cardinals come back later and say he was removed with fatigue-related issues. Right. When you hear fatigue-related issues, what the heck does that mean? How do we couch this right now with where Matthew Liberatore might be for the Cardinals?
And I think part of it, when you look at his history and being in that relief swing type role that he's been pretty much since he's been with the Cardinals. I mean, he's made a lot of starts, but he's never just been in the rotation like he has been this time. It's natural. I mean, at least you hope that it's natural. Like the look on the bright side of life.
We're looking for reasons. We're looking for optimism, potentially.
It has been. I mean, he's been a consistent part of rotation for the first time in a long time. He's been a guy who has gone out there and given them 6 innings on a regular basis, 7 innings in a couple occasions, and and that's different, right? You hope that there's been talk about going into a 6-man rotation, spreading things out. Theoretically, they could have enough depth to skip him a turn in the rotation, if they needed to do something along those lines. But yeah, I mean, he's when we talk about the plan for this season, let's see what guys have. Let's see how guys can contribute. This is one of those things that are going to come up, and how does he respond to that? How does the team respond to that? So yeah, it'll be interesting to see, even as the next couple of days come out and we hear more than fatigue issues.
Right.
If we do hear anything, that'll be what I'm interested to see.
Yeah. I mean, the first things first is you hope health-wise he's holding up, that there's not something where they're not quite sure what's wrong and they'll find it out. And then we know, hopefully it's not that situation. But I mean, we've heard the term dead arm before, where at times a guy, suddenly he loses 5-6 miles per hour of velocity, and there's not anything that they diagnose as an injury, but it's just like, I don't know, he's got a dead arm. That's not something you want, but it's could that be a possibility here? You mentioned the workload. I remember thinking in the month of May, with Matthew Liberatore going as deep into games as he was relatively consistently, and the notion that he hasn't been in this role regularly and since he was in the minors, really, kind of wonder, okay, what's the workload going to look like for him in 2025, especially if the Cardinals continue down a path where, hey, they're contending, they're competitive in the National League wildcard chase and in the NL Central. What do they do with Liberatore as you get to the second half of the season? If he's going 6-7 innings every time, the innings load will creep up. I guess this maybe answers the question where we might have gotten to it was maybe too good to be true to think, oh, we're going to get to 150 innings of Liberatore and they're going to have to shut him down. Well, you're maybe hitting that roadblock a little bit sooner, which is probably a natural progression given the fact that this is a relatively new role. They've been trying to get him into a role like this for some time. It hasn't really clicked until this year. Now that you're hitting a little bit of a wall, the Rangers outing didn't look the way that we were used to seeing 2025 Libby look. And then what we saw against the Royals yesterday, obviously maybe a time to step off the gas a little bit. I'm wondering, though, how that might impact the way the Cardinals move forward. I think Michael McGreevy was coming sooner rather than later anyway. And now is this a notion where, okay, we hoped it could be a 6-man rotation with Libby, but we might have to just say Libby is the one that we skip for a turn and give him a little bit of time. Is that one start to be skipped? Is that a 15-day stint on the IL with whatever, fatigue related, whatever you would call that? I don't know what's the best for the Cardinals right now.
Well, I think part of it depends on how they see the season, right? Where they see the season going, because and I think we know the answer to that question. They see themselves as contenders at this point, right? There's no reason that they think, and I think they're justified, that they can't be a team that's contending for a playoff spot. And if you look at what does August and September look like if you're making a playoff push, Liberatore's in the middle of that, right? I mean, he is essential for big series, big games. I mean, the Cardinals don't have, as has been well documented outside of Sonny Gray, they don't have a lot of swing and miss in that rotation. Liberatore's a guy that can do that. He sometimes pitches the contact and he doesn't have the strikeout numbers some other guys do, but he can reach back and get that extra gear and get a swing and miss it when he needs to. And so, I mean, if you're the Cardinals, all of a sudden you're thinking, let's maybe, back off a little bit. Let's take him out at 85, 90 pitches instead of letting him go 105, not that he's going to 110. But let's try to back him off a little bit. And even if he's throwing well, and it comes back again to, I feel like every time we talk about the Cardinals and what they're going to do, it comes down to the bullpen, right? And if you have multiple guys in the bullpen that can allow you to let Liberatore pitch 5 innings and get pulled when he's still throwing well, because you've got the depth to do that and still feel like you have a chance to win. I mean, that's a big part of it, right? And I think that as you see how they evaluate where he is now, and again, this is assuming it's not an issue,
right?
Like a serious issue that's going to cause him to miss extended time. But if it's just really fatigue, and they say that, and you kind of immediately think of like a hockey lower body injury, right? Yeah, we're like, either we don't know, or we're not.
We find out after the season that actually his leg fell off, and we just weren't going to tell you until we were eliminated
on the mound.
Sure, yeah.
So I mean, it'll be interesting to see it, and I think a lot of it depends on how the next month goes.
And I think before that, we're even going to find the Cardinals have to make a decision. So when you have a doubleheader, you can go one of two ways, right? You can just basically pitch the guy that was going to pitch on Wednesday and the guy that was going to pitch on Thursday, and they both pitch on Thursday. And that's what the Cardinals ended up doing because they didn't really have anybody from AAA that would have come up to be that spot starter. Right. And that's your other option, is to say, all right, we've got a 27th man. Instead of calling up a reliever like they did Riley O'Brien, we're going to call up a starter whose turn it is, who's on the 40-man, and he's going to give us 5 innings, and that's going to be the way that we, kind of give an extra day of rest to the rotation, allow them to honor that rain day, essentially.
Right.
And then but if you don't do it that way, which is where the Cardinals are at right now, next turn through, you've got 2 guys that are not ready to necessarily pitch on a day where you're going to need one of them. And so that is it. All signs pointing to, Ryan, Michael McGreevy being the answer to that question. And really, the Cardinals could do it one of 2 ways. They could start McGreevy on Sunday against the Dodgers, or they could wait until Monday with the Toronto Blue Jays, coming to town. I feel like they're probably going to angle for him to go Sunday, and we'll see him at Busch Stadium this weekend. This is all assuming the weather doesn't change the plan again.
Right.
Regardless, I think McGreevy is going to be one of the arms that gets you through that. And I think that's welcome news for Cardinals fans who have been destined and dying to see him since the very beginning of spring.
I mean, and then he just whet the appetite with the great relief outing he had.
Oh, that was
when he was up.
Electric. May the 4th doubleheader against the Mets, going off the sheet in a game that was like, you're bringing in your 7th, 8th, 9th relievers on any other day. But guess what? They already pitched. So you had to go with McGreevy, and he did a great job.
And to your point about what you do in a doubleheader, I mean, if McGreevy, he had thrown the previous day, right? If it had been his turn,
it would have worked out.
They may have done something along those lines. We may have seen him start game 2 of that, or probably game 1 of that doubleheader. Let's say he does start Sunday. I mean, that's a tall task.
Dodgers,
right? I mean, here's Shohei Ohtani, here's Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, and all of these guys. Even Max Muncy, who's got the ability to still pop the ball out of the ballpark. That's tough. But I don't think there's nothing in watching McGreevy pitch that makes me think he's worried about that.
I agree with you.
Yeah. I mean, the Cardinals may try to think, it may enter their thought process a little bit, but I guarantee you, if you would ask McGreevy, would you prefer to throw? He's like, I don't care. I want to be here. I want to prove that I can.
Mets have a good lineup too. I mean, they've got some dudes that he had to face on that Sunday, and he did a great job a little bit more than a month ago. And the other part of the conversation is, right now, with us kind of freaking out about what we're seeing from Liberatore, you almost forget that a couple of days ago, Palante didn't have his strongest stuff, and he's been trending in that direction as well, to where before all of this came up with Libby, there were Cardinals fans that were saying, oh, swap him out. I mean, send Palante to AAA to figure it out and bring up McGreevy. McGreevy pitched the same night as Palante on Tuesday. 75 pitches, and they took him out in the middle of an inning despite it being a scoreless outing. They were planning for Michael McGreevy to come up anyway before all of this took place. That's the thing to remember. But now you go, all right, would you rather have McGreevy, who is undaunted, ready for whatever, Does he face the Dodgers, or would you go, all right, Palante, you've been struggling a little bit. We're going to send you right back out there. That's another guy who's undaunted, by the way. I mean, Andre Palante doesn't care either. And he doesn't like to lose. He doesn't like to pitch poorly. If you see his post games after an outing where it didn't go well, he's just ready for that little 5-minute media scrum to be over so he can start thinking about what he's going to do for his next outing. That is a guy who is as competitive as anybody in that Cardinals clubhouse. But with the way that he's been looking recently, it might be good to get him the extra day, not even from like a competitive standpoint against us, save him from having to face the Dodgers, but maybe him being the guy that, all right, it's your turn to pitch Sunday. He goes Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. He could pitch Sunday. Yeah. Or they could say, we're going to, for at least one guy, you're getting that extra day, and that's where we're going to slap McGreevy in right ahead of Palante. That's kind of the way that I would do it, I think, based on those factors, and probably what they'll do too.
And I know there has been talk about that. I think he's still an important part of the rotation.
Palante?
He is, yeah.
Oh, I agree with that.
Going forward, I mean, I know the game against the Royals, but it's not like he gave up 5 home runs, right? I mean, he gave up a couple of them, but I mean, there's still like some singles, some seeing eye singles that got through, and sequencing, put them all together, and all of a sudden it's a big giant inning.
That's what he said. The 5th inning, and gave up, I believe, 4 consecutive singles after a home run. And he said it, stunk that it was all together, but that's, kind of what can happen sometimes.
And it's true. I mean, I think when you look at what the Cardinals need out of the rotation, right? What do they need out of the guy every time, a pitcher every time he goes out? And you want 5-6 innings, right? And he's done that pretty consistently, even in the couple of starts that he had before that, when the grumbling started. I mean, he'd still got into the 6th inning, gave up 3 runs one time, 4 runs the other, and one of them was unearned. So, I mean, he's still putting the team in position to win baseball games. And I think that's the thing. And when you're looking at, trying to extend that rotation, and we talk about, and it all comes down again, I mean, the bullpen again, right? Because if he drops out, then what happens? Then Matt's, if McGreevy comes up, then Matt's becomes the next guy up.
Right.
You take Matt's out of the bullpen, then all of a sudden, he's been a big piece there.
Yeah.
And you're trying to kind of reset things, and I guess Palante would go into the bullpen in that scenario. But which
we didn't like to see either last year.
Right.
I mean, Palante started as a reliever last season, and he feels like the type of guy, maybe a little bit similar to Michaelis, where when Michaelis would struggle, people say, I don't care, get him in the bullpen. Yeah. But you think about it, he almost needs that runway within an outing, because he's susceptible to BABIP if it's not going his way that day. But he's got the ability to get you a double play ball to be able to get through some things. When you're just a 1-inning reliever, and they used him this way, like, okay, we need a double play, bring him in to let's see it. And then it's a ground ball. It's the exact pitch you wanted, and it goes through for a hit and 2 runs scored. Everybody thinks Palante stinks.
Right.
He almost needs that opportunity to know he's got the next inning and the 4 after it to be able to work through some things to be at his most effective. So I would think if they do feel Palante at any point needs a tune-up, I would hope that would come in Memphis for 15 days, take 2 or 3 starts down there, and work on the things that you've found before to be successful. The sinker has been struggling as a pitch for him. It was, he developed pitches and ways to attack right-handed hitters last year when he rejoined the rotation in May, and that's how we saw him be so successful. If he needs a week or 2 to get anchored back to that at some point, I'd rather see that happen in Memphis than at the big league level in the bullpen. But I also, you kind of wonder about the depth of Memphis, because this is the first with Libby. This is like the first time we've really seen an injury, if we're even calling it that, when it comes to a Cardinals starter. So how they look at the depth beyond that is going to be interesting as well.
And I mean, if you're talking about depth, not that he's in the conversation now, but when you're looking at the future of the rotation and what it's going to be, the Cardinals released their minor league pitcher and position player of the year of the month. And Takeo Roby has been fantastic.
Been lighting it up.
We talk about swing and miss stuff. He had I think it was like 12 and a half strikeouts per 9 innings over the last month. And, he's been a guy that's, I mean, honestly, I'm just kind of thinking about that because the email came in right before we came on the air. But, I mean, I think, and when, to your point about Palante, you said something that's key. Like, if we get to that point, I still think we're 3 or 4 bad starts from that point.
It depends on how bad. Like, if you're giving up 7 every night, it might be a different story. But that was the first time he did that.
Exactly. I mean, the other ones have been like 3. That
runs. Was his first game where he gave up more than 4, whether earned or unearned. That was the first time that it happened.
I still think he's away from there. Or getting knocked out in the 2nd inning. I mean, that's different. That's a different scenario. But as he's been over the last 3 starts, it would take at least 3 more like that before I'd even think about doing something like that.
I would agree with that. And I want to touch a little bit more on some of the bullpen thoughts for what we've seen from guys like Matz and Leahy. But before we do that, I want to remind you that our programming is presented to you by Gray Bar, your distributor for electrical and datacom needs. And everything here on STL Sports Central, we'll take some getting used to, is brought to you by DraftKings. The crown is yours. And right now you can download the DraftKings Pick 6 app and use code STL Sports. That's code STL Sports for new customers to play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits. It's baseball season, NBA Finals going on. Lots of ways to be able to play on DraftKings Pick 6. Better payouts, bigger wins, only with Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
So I want to ask you, Ryan, a little bit more about what we've seen from Steven Matz and Kyle Leahy recently, because when you talk about, hey, the need to maybe take it a little bit easier on some of these starters, it's going to be more comfortable to do that when you've got relievers that you can rely upon. And Oliver Marmol largely has had that this year, but we've seen a little bit of a downtick from Leahy and Matz in particular. And I think those are the two guys that were maybe performing as good as anybody in that bullpen for a stretch of the season, but maybe also had that little connotation of, we didn't expect it from either of them. And so when you feel like a guy is performing better than what you thought he would, and then he kind of comes back down to earth, the inclination is to go, oh yeah, that's what we kind of thought these guys were. But I still think there's more in there from both of them. What have you kind of seen from those guys lately, and how do we project moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that those are guys that are going to go out there and put up a 1.4 ERA over an entire season, right? There are going to be ebbs and flows. And, ideally, if you're looking at how you want things to play out, you don't want the ebb and flow to happen at the same time.
Yeah, and
right? I mean, it's great when they're up, but when they kind of comes back down and those ERAs normalize a little bit. But I think when you're worried about things, you're worried about like velocity declining significantly. You're worried about kind of a loss of control, a loss of that ability to hit the corners and hit their spots and induce weak contact. And we haven't necessarily seen that as much. I do think it illustrates two things. One, how important those two have been. Yeah. Right. Because when they were playing great, I mean, those guys were going out there and you could count on a zero. And in Matt's case, sometimes for two plus innings. Right. They need more guys around him. Maton's been fantastic. Obviously, John King has been better as of late. If they're going to be the team that is going to compete with the Cubs, because the Cubs are very good, and compete for a wild card spot, and the wild card spots can be tough because, I mean, those NL West teams are good.
And they're going to add. I mean, that's the other thing.
And they're going to face the Rockies.
Yep.
At least they're not
12 times.
Not 18 times
like it used to
past. But I mean, 12. There's a lot of dubs out there for those teams to get. But they're going to have 4, 5, 6 guys that they can count on a regular basis in that bullpen. And it's been better than the last couple of years. And if it continues as is, I mean, you look at that. You look at the Baseball Reference page right now. They've got 6 relievers with an ERA between 2.35 and 3.38. I guarantee you, at the beginning of the season, the Cardinals have said, "Yes, I'll take that sight unseen, and I'll be thrilled with that."
And they would have also said, "Hey, glad to see Helsley's doing well. Glad JoJo's doing well. Maton signings pan out. Who are the other 3? Like, who's doing this?" Because I mean, you did have a lot of questions coming into the season, and that's what's interesting. You would have lined up. You might have said Ryan Fernandez, and that's another guy that we've completely forgot of him. Out of sight, out of mind. But he's starting to turn the corner in Memphis a little bit. I still don't think we've seen the last of him in 2025, but you think about the way we would have projected that bullpen at the beginning, 7, 8, 9. Okay, Fernandez and JoJo might be sharing the 8th. Maton signed. He's going to mix in. The fact that really Matz and Leahy have largely been their 2 best is what is really where you get the good bullpens. That's what the Brewers have done for years, where you get these guys that you've never heard of before. And then when you're playing, you're putting the game on MLB TV, you're like, who is this guy with a 2.12 ERA for the Brewers? And it's August and you've never heard of him before. That's kind of what the Cardinals were, set up to have with a guy like Kyle Leahy performing that way. And then it's just going to be a matter of maintaining, but within reason. Like you said, 1.4, probably not. Can he settle into the high 2s and that be really productive for the Cardinals? Definitely. And then you have more guys that you can trust, because the notion of a manager not being able to go to the same relievers every night for 7, 8, 9 is very real. It might be difficult to grapple with during periods where you feel like, you lose a game with less than your best out there, but Ollie Marmol can't just use the same guys every night. So guys emerging that you didn't expect, that would have been, they're kind of in that the B squad of relievers. And then suddenly they're the guys you want to go to, is a really useful thing for a manager and a ball club as well.
Yeah. And I think it shows how good the Cardinals have been as a whole, how much better they've been than expectations, that it's an issue when they can't use the same 7, 8, 9 guys.
Yeah,
guys in the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning every single night, because the games matter at that point. Whereas, if they were a team that was struggling and behind, I mean, who cares who throws the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning if you're down by 5 runs? Right. But that's been
Matt Svenson's territory, basically, where it's like, it's hard to get into the circle of trust. But when you're Ollie Marmol and the other 7 are guys that you've used before, the roles that you've been able to use them in, and you trust it, it's kind of hard for a guy to crack in. And so far, Matt Swanson, to his credit, has just pitched when they've told him to, and he's got a 3 ERA as well. So those sorts of things you're hoping can be the case, where guys come from areas that you don't expect, and there needs to be a fleet. They need to continue to roll in and go, I didn't know this guy had that in him. Glad to see it. I'll kind of mentally couch that for later, and we'll continue to develop our plan as a season goes along. Another guy to mention with that, Andre Granillo. Have you seen his numbers for Memphis recently? Because he's looking really good. 1.88 ERA. He gave up a couple of runs this week. But this is what jumps off the page to me. In 28 innings, 45 strikeouts, and only 8 walks. That's, for me, I would like to see swing and miss, which they talk a lot about how, we don't have as much. I think with Matz and Leahy, that's sort of an issue they've run into, where those guys will get some strikeouts, but that's not maybe their calling card. And so when you don't have that as just the demonstrative part of your game, it can be a little bit difficult to imagine, living on BABIP every single night. And eventually you're going to get unlucky. You're going to get those numbers to balance out a little bit. Whatever Granillo's been doing has been working. And I would love to see the Cardinals maybe carve out an opportunity for him later on this season. We got to remember too, it's a long summer. It's still early June. And there's a lot of baseball yet to be played. Right. But the next baseball, Ryan, to be played is the Cardinals taking on the Dodgers. And that is the pinnacle of the sport in terms of name recognition, salary, you name it. The Dodgers have had their troubles staying healthy on the pitching side, and so you might get a little bit fortunate with some names that it's not Kershaw every night. It's not going to be Shohei Ohtani pitching. You just got to worry about him batting against the Cardinals this weekend. But what are your expectations as we kind of look ahead to this series? Sonny Gray, probable starter as I look at it on MLB.com tonight. He'll take on Wrobleski, who's got an 8 ERA, but then you get a legitimate starter in Yamamoto on Saturday. Still TBD for Sunday. Cardinals will throw Eric Fetty tomorrow. What do you think is going to happen in this series, and how do we look at where the Cardinals have been over the past week, now welcoming obviously a really tough task into town?
Yeah, the Cardinals have played pretty well against good teams, right? And I think when you look at this Dodgers team, and you mentioned earlier about how this Liberatore thing is kind of the first injury-ish thing that the Cardinals have dealt with. The Dodgers have been the opposite.
Child's play.
They've had like a dozen guys on the
Glass now is on the 60. Yeah. We haven't seen Kershaw. There's probably more that I'm forgetting. It's been crazy for them.
Yeah, and Roki Sasaki hasn't been.
Yeah.
He's struggled a little bit. Yamamoto's been fantastic. Dustin May has shown in coming back from his injury issues that he still has that swing and miss. He hasn't had the consistency I think that they were kind of hoping for. I think he's slated to go on Sunday. Tony Gonsolin has come off. He's given up a lot of home runs. It has not been the season the Dodgers have imagined, but I think when you have, we talk about depth, and they have guys that they can bring up. They can give Landon Knack, 7 starts and kind of plugging him in.
MSG will mix in from time to time.
And all of these different guys. And because they've built up the depth. But I think when you look at the Dodgers, and the expectations for them haven't changed a bit, right? Because they have, air quote, struggled a little bit. They're not pacing. They're not 10 wins ahead of everybody.
Still leading the best division, though. I mean, a division where you've got everybody above 500, but Colorado.
I think, just as from a perspective of watching the game, anytime you get a chance to watch Shohei Ohtani, you have to take it. You have to go down to the ballpark and watch him hit, and obviously, as they say, old friend Tommy Edman is back in town with the club. But it's been a season. It's been a challenging season. Dave Roberts, the manager, has been forced to do things maybe he wouldn't want to.
Right.
They've been forced to rely on guys in situations that they will not be in September and October. But they're a tough team. I mean, the Dodgers, like you said, leading the best division in baseball and leading some good teams. I mean, the Diamondbacks, even, I know they've struggled, but they showed in Atlanta that they have the ability to win any game. The Padres have been good. The Giants have been better than anyone expected. So yeah, I mean, it'll be a good test to see what they do, even though they're not going against necessarily, aside from Yamamoto, they're not going against like three aces that the Dodgers throwing out there.
Yeah. And I think part of that is just this idea that kind of feels like an NBA season almost. We're like, all right, let's just get to October. Like the Dodgers have
more than anyone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like they have the automatic entrance into October, not because they're just going to have it handed to them, but because they're just so good that they can withstand all these pitching injuries and still find a way to be 13 games above 500 right now in early June. They're going to be tough this weekend. I like the way though that the Cardinals line up because they're going to have Sonny Gray starting tonight. And I don't know. And look, we've seen Sonny Gray starts go bad at times this year, not as often at home. Right. Though, and he gets an opportunity to pitch at Busch. You hope the weather cooperates. That's been a constant theme, it seems, right? Like in recent weeks. But I think with the way that we saw Sonny Gray his last time out, you're thinking, all right, if this is the guy that we can set the tone with in the Dodgers series, maybe there's an opportunity to get some things done. And the concerns offensively from the weekend where you scored 4 total runs against the Rangers, I think those are largely put to rest with the way the Cardinals hit against the Royals. I know they didn't maybe come out in game 1 and do anything after that third inning like you needed because of the pitching meltdown that you had, but like you put up requisite run totals, and yesterday we saw them taking some pretty good at bats in situations to be maybe feeling decent about things heading into the weekend against, like you said, a pitching staff that's a little bit depleted too.
Yeah, I think when you look at what you're expecting and hoping, I mean, you want to see the contact, right? You want to see put balls in play. It's still a big opportunity for guys like, for Burleson and with Walker out, for guys like Burleson to get a couple extra ABs, for Nolan Gorman to get a couple extra ABs. It is still, I think we sometimes forget that even though they're in the playoff picture, right? They're still trying to figure out what they have. And I think when you face teams like the Dodgers, it's like, and Joe Roderick and I have talked about many times, it's one thing to see what a guy has in, April and May against the Nationals. It's another thing to see what they have against a team like the Dodgers or in games that are down the playoff stretch in August and September. I think this is an early chance to see what they could do against a team that's as good as the Dodgers.
Wilson, if you could throw a couple of those comments on the screen. I just cannot see them on my computer, having some internet issues here. So I'll have to look long range. We've got some stuff in the way. There we go. Yeah, if we get one of these 3, Uncle John will be happy. What do you think about, like, what's the expectation for what needs to happen for the Cardinals to feel like, all right, like, is it a case where, like, just don't get swept because it's the Dodgers, or is it?
No, I don't think so.
We've got to get things going again because we were winning a ton of series, and we don't want to let this become a consistent theme to drop a 3rd series in a row is what it would be.
I don't think so. I think when you're looking at how you want to build the mentality of a team, obviously they're never going to say that, but I think this is a team that's, as the Dodgers are right now, can absolutely stand there and go 9 innings with them and have a chance to win. You just got to be careful pitching to Ohtani. You got to be careful pitching to Freeman. Outside of that, you can make pitches against these guys. There's some swing and miss in that lineup, maybe not as much as the Cardinals have in the rotation, but there's no reason that they can't. At least take 1, maybe 2, and be in. I'll put it this way: there's no reason they can't be in contention all 3 games. Yamamoto is going to be tough; he's really good. But aside from that, there's an opportunity to score runs and compete against a team like that.
Yeah, and if you happen to, they've done well against top starters. It's not just been that they've played well against good winning caliber teams. They've beaten the pitching that comes with that. And it usually comes by them staking with an approach. I think Brant Brown has been a big part of that this season. And all right, you don't score in the first couple of innings, but the second time you see a guy, the third time you see a guy, are you chipping away? And that's been a pretty consistent theme. So believe me, there'll probably be 9 or 10 strikeouts against Yamamoto, but can they score the 3 runs, confetti, hold the other side to 3 over 6 innings, and then you make it a battle of the bullpens. We've seen the Cardinals fare decently in those situations. But yeah, if you're just lining up the pitching,
Yeah.
I'll take Sonny tonight over Wrobleski.
Right.
And you hope, I mean, that's to win the series. I think they've got to win the first one. It's going to be very difficult to drop the one where you had the biggest pitching advantage and then bounce back and win the second two. But if McGreevy is your pitcher on Sunday, I don't know. I mean, McGreevy Dustin May would be a pretty interesting matchup
a lot of fun.
of, you know, a guy who was a highly touted prospect and just has not been able to stay healthy. And now we're finally seeing Dustin May get a little bit of time for the first time in a while. And then McGreevy, who everybody, you know, thinks and I think could be the next big thing and the next contributor to the Cardinals consistently. So 2 out of 3, maybe not impossible. Pitchers duel tonight. Win tomorrow 16-15. That's coming from you, Mama, there on YouTube. I don't know if you're getting 15 against any Dodgers pitching staff. I know they've had injuries, but let's slow down.
Yamamoto, but yeah.
Yamamoto with a 2.3 ERA. I just don't think. And look, the version of beating these great starters has usually been you're getting a good start from your guy.
You have to.
You're winning 3-2.
Right.
You're winning. Like, think of the Skeens games. It's not like they're hanging. Well, they did get 5 on Skeens, but they're not doing that every single time. In the Tarek School Bowl game, they didn't end up winning that game, but they got to him eventually, gave up 3 runs to where they were at least in the contest. That's really what we're looking for. Can Eric Fetty do that on the other side, though, tomorrow? He's another guy that we've kind of looked at recently and said, you squint a little bit and you go, oh, man, maybe this Cardinals starting rotation that we felt like just as we got into the mode of believing that, okay, this is very steady. It's kind of a machine that runs itself. We don't have to really think about it or worry about it. Now you're starting to see some of the cracks. What about Fetty for you?
You're just seeing the up and down, though. And I think that's natural because again, Fetty's not a guy who's going to go out there and post a 2.2 ERA for the season. Right? Yeah. He's going to have an ERA. Like if you'd say at the beginning of the year, again, I keep doing these things, but if you say at the beginning of the year that Fetty through 12 starts is going to have an ERA of 3.8, you're like, yeah, that's great. That's fantastic. That means that most of the time he goes out there, he's giving you 5 innings, he's keeping the team in a chance to win the game, and that's been good. And he's a guy that most of the time is not going to get chased after 2 or 3 innings because he's a veteran. He's got the ability, if he has a bad second inning, to come back.
I think it's only happened once to him where he left early.
5th inning, and at least keep you in there, keep the bullpen a little bit rested. So yeah, I mean, has he been great lately? No, but am I worried that he's falling apart? No.
Kind of just the ebbs and flows of a pitcher of his caliber, where he's kind of a middle of the rotation type of guy. I think that's a fun game, though. If you looked at, and all these guys have had 12 starts because the Cardinals haven't had anybody miss starts. Sonny Gray, 3.65 ERA. I would have said, yeah, I'll take that. Like I pressed that button day one. I know that people thought, well, when we got him, he was number 2 in the Cy Young in the American League. You know, you're going to have some regression from that. And I think 3.5 ERA, perfectly suitable for Gray. Liberatore being at 3.82, which, mind you, before 2 starts ago, he was 2.7.
Right. Yeah.
You would have said day one of the season, he's thrown how many innings in 12 games? Oh, he must be a starter. Cool. At 3.8, I think you would have taken that. Fetty is the identical ERA. They've thrown the exact same number of outs on the season. Libby and Eric Fetty. Libby, if he could have not had the fatigue, would have passed him, obviously. Palante would maybe be the one where you say, all right, 4.91. Did I expect some regression from last year? Perhaps. But I'd love to see him living in like the low 4s at least. And that's also a recent development where he ballooned over a half a run from his last game alone. And then Michael is 3.96. I think might be the one where you would say, I can't get to the Staples button fast enough to press it, just because he did. He struggled last year to a 5.35.
And I think when you look at too, when you're looking at the baseball reference page and you're looking at all the different numbers, the fielding independent pitching is when you look at. And fielding independent pitching is usually something that very much favors the strikeout guys. Right. So you'll see a guy have a 3.5 ERA. And if he's a strikeout guy, his FIP will be at, in the 2.9 range. And if he's not, it'll be at 4.5. But I mean, their fielding independent pitching numbers are pretty solid. Sonny Gray's at 3.27, Fetty's at 4.29, Liberatore's at 3.05 because he's not walking.
He's not walking anybody. Yeah. Gray doesn't walk anybody.
Yeah. And I think what that shows me is those ERAs aren't flukes. Yeah. Like they're not just, it's not all BABIP. They're pitching well. They're limiting home runs to an extent. Palante's given up too many, but they're limiting walks and they're doing a good job of, again, keeping their team in the game. And so that's, when you talk about, would you be happy with the rotation's performance? Yeah, absolutely. You would 100% take everyone making every start and having the ERA around 4. Yeah, absolutely.
And if I told you Michael McGreevy's got a 0 ERA, people would be over the moon. But then I would
they'd be like, wait, why is he only?
I'm sorry, it's 5 innings. That's all you've gotten from him. But you're going to get more. If not this weekend, it will be Monday. I'm telling you, the guy is going to be pitching soon. The the schedule and the way it lines up just makes too much sense. Whether the Cardinals have announced it or will announce it, it's just inevitable. So if you've been pining for McGreevy, I'm not making fun of you. I think he's been a guy that would be worth having around, but you're going to finally get your wish. And if you like Cardinals content, you'll get your wish by continuing to follow everything going on STL Sports Central as we continue throughout the season. We'll have post-game tonight, if there is a game between the Cardinals and the Dodgers down at Busch Stadium. But Ryan, any parting thoughts before we dip out of here for this edition of Card Central 365?
Not necessarily.
What did you have to get off your chest that you're like, you know what? We didn't talk about this. We didn't talk, and I just have to mention.
I wanted to bring up Takeo Roby. That's what I wanted to, and I got that. I found a way to work that in
He pitched
earlier.
into the 7th too in his last start, which they had been very careful about him innings wise, which makes sense. He's kind of in that like Dustin May category where you go, man, the guy is such electric stuff, but he has not been able to stay healthy throughout the course of his professional career so far. And so to see him pitching into the 7th in his last game, I believe June the 4th, so a couple of days ago, that's notable.
Showing me efficiency.
Yeah,
right. That's showing me that he's not getting into a ton of at bats where he's throwing 7, 8, 9 pitches, because he's throwing in there because they're watching not so much the ups and downs, but like the pitch count, and they're being very careful with those types of things. I mean, as they are with all of their minor league guys, and everyone in baseball is these days, because that's just the way it is. But yeah, you go into the 7th inning in the minor leagues, and that means you're throwing strikes, you're not getting hit, and you're getting guys out in low pitch counts, and that's what you want. That's what you want out of guys like that, and he's getting the swing and misses as well.
Yeah, and he talked. The Cardinals had a little Zoom for media this morning where he talked and was asked about, like, what's your workload going to look like this year? Because you've had those injuries in the past, and you're, right now you're staying durable, and that's what you want. But have the Cardinals talk to you about that plan? And he kind of said, I'm sure they've got one. I hope they've got one, but I don't really want to be part of those conversations because I just want to, go focus what I'm doing. But ideally, he, did acknowledge it'd be nice to know that, you can be paced out to where you don't have to end your season early. But I just think, in as much as we want to go, could he be the next? Let's get him up to AAA. Let's get him up to the bigs. We want that, but we also are like, man, this is you're fragile. You want to, it's not that he's going to be fragile moving forward, but in fairness, he's been fragile in the past. And so now that you're getting this from him, the raw stuff is there, and you just want to continue to be able to channel it. And like, that's tough for an organization, I think, to know, like, this guy could be helping us sooner than later. That kind of stuff could be in the St. Louis bullpen by the end of the year. I mean, this year, but do you want to play it that way fast and loose with a guy who has had the injury past that he's had? I
mean, you look at his innings pitched. I mean, last year it was, or in 23, it was 58 innings, and then he pitched in the fall league. Last year it was 38 innings.
Yep.
This year he's already thrown more this year, and his numbers have been much better, by the way. Because even though, like, when he came over in the trade, he was this like kind of high level prospect, even though he hadn't necessarily had the breakthrough season in terms of his numbers.
Yeah,
they just liked his stuff.
It was the stuff.
And even in the last 2 years, I mean, in 23 his ERA was 4.6. Last year it was almost 6.5. So you'd seen the stuff, but you hadn't seen the production. And this year his ERA is at 2.5. I mean, in a whip under 1. And that's why they project, right? That's why they look at a guy and say, this is the stuff he has, this is what he can do. And we'll worry about the numbers later. And this year, the numbers are kind of sliding in there, which is encouraging to see.
Getting proof of concept. You could see him in AAA, I think, before terribly long. But that's another case where they have kind of been starved for innings there as well because of the injuries that they've had in the rotation. And so if you're bringing up another guy that, like, the organizational philosophy is 4 innings, 5 and dive, let's kind of make sure he's able to continue pitching throughout the full season, that could be a little bit of an issue too. And there's enough quality competition at AA. I mean, you look at the Cardinals Springfield lineup with guys like Weatherholt and Joshua Baez coming up and doing great things.
Yeah, Baez has been great.
I mean, they've got a bunch of guys in that lineup where you're excited from a prospect standpoint to see what those guys are doing night after night. So there's plenty of quality competition that Takeo Roby is getting there in AA. And that's a guy that St. Louis fans will definitely be excited to see when the time comes. Just for now, hope to continue seeing him doing what he is doing. And that's a good segue. We'll keep doing what we're doing here on STL Sports Central. This has been Card Central 365. Make sure you hit up the YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, and be right back here later on tonight after the Cardinals take on the Dodgers out at Busch Stadium. For Ryan Fagan, I am Brenden Schaeffer, and we'll talk to you next time on STL Sports Central.